Hello to anyone who is watching this video right now, where I will explain some of what went into making the Keeley data video. This was mostly aimed at Josh, but I'm going to post the link in the Discord. Maybe I might post the link elsewhere for people who might find it useful, but yeah, I'm just going to kind of explain some of the decisions that I made, kind of about the video, why I made the graphics as I did, lessons learned, and what I might do next time. Which I guess might as well start at the beginning, which I wasn't really lying in the video when I said that, yeah, I do genuinely have a Keeley sheet that I've been updating since about... Well, we've been doing Keeley predictions since 2018, me and my good friend Hey It Me Ben. But we were basically doing it in Discord chats, and I think because after a while we realized that, we've done 2 years of these, I'm going to migrate everything over into a Google Sheet. I think I might have also done that as well because we started inviting other people to do it as well, and it was just easier to keep track and also to get people to fill it out. And basically over the years, that's also expanded now into, I kind of do it with Discords as well, where, you know, people fill in their data and then we lock that off, and then on the night we go through and see who got how many right. And obviously we'll be doing that again this year. There are some great prizes up for grabs for people who want to do that. But yeah, but basically all I was really tracking was like, you know, who, you know, what the nominations, you know, what our basically nominations were, and then what the wins were in every category. And then at some point I decided to basically take all of those winner columns and kind of smush them together, and then I kind of ended up with a bigger grid then of, okay, who were the winners over the years. And I'm going to sound really stupid, but I genuinely don't really remember why I decided to start looking at Keeley data. I think it might have just been the fact that because I'm doing Fantasy Critic League this year with a couple of friends, and I kind of wanted to get a bit of an idea of, well, okay, what's likely to win Keeley's time now? So I basically took the info that we had from previous years. I added all the nominations as well. The main thing I kind of wanted to look at, which I figured would be like, okay, this would make most sense for like, okay, what are we looking at? Was Metacritic and OpenCritic scores. OpenCritic less so much now because it is such a newer thing, but you know, the trend ended up being like, you know, as expected, whatever was the highest rated game of the year usually also won game of the year as well. And also kind of in our group chats, we used to sort of speak a little bit about like, oh, there's obvious games that always win, and yeah, like action RPG, action adventure, platformer, survival horror are like genres that always come up a lot. I think there was also another idea that I had for a video, which probably won't happen. Maybe it might, but this is kind of what will lead into more what sparked the video happening was I was kind of joking and saying about that. But if you wanted to, you could kind of boil every video game genre down to two things. Now, there was the Calvin and Hobbes one of menus and parkour, which around the time I think I made a similar joke of, well, every game is either D&D or pinball, because that's where all video games came from. But nowadays, the joke was kind of more, oh, it's either action-adventure or it's sports. And by sports, I mean actual sports games, racing games and stuff, but also anything that was very high score driven, or anything that was kind of like competition driven. Because like action adventures, there's like no competition to it at all. It's just you play the game, you do the story, and then that's it, and you're done. Mostly very single player focused and stuff. And that's always like the stuff that wins at the Game Awards. They don't really, apart from the 1 year that they gave it to Overwatch, and I think that was mostly on the basis that they thought they were going to add a PvE mode and make stuff more about the characters. They have always kind of given it to single player games, but you know, it is kind of what it is. And yeah, I kind of then used that as a basis. Now there's a big month's gap in here, so I'm not quite sure why I made this, then went back to it in a month's time. And I should mention as well, videos were happening around this point as well, but I kind of then extrapolated that data and I went, okay, if we're to look at those as trends, what does that say about what could win this year at the Game of the Year Awards? And kind of as I highlighted in the video, those top, it was top 5 at the time because we didn't know how. Yeah, hold on. Yeah, that's right. Sorry, there are 6 there because, like, even at the time we kind of knew that, like Hades was going to do pretty well. Yeah, I think that's why I updated it that day, because there's when Hades 2 came out. So I popped that in to be like, oh, well, yeah, obviously this is going to do really well because, there wasn't enough user scores at that point. Yeah, that's right. So I think I had hopped in to kind of update it from there. And then I think I just kind of poked away at it for a week. And then, and then Bobby Broccoli appears because I brought up my jokey action adventure sports game thing in the Isabel Discord. And Willow was kind of asking a bit about it, and I basically said my thesis of, well, if it gets a game of the year, it's usually a single player, all of these kind of things. An RPG comes from the classic adventure genre, action kind of applies to everything, and so, all these games, if it's a Keighley game, it's action-adventure. And then Bobby Broccoli perks up and goes, hey, would you ever consider doing a video breaking down these stats? And I was a bit like, I don't know if people would particularly find it interesting, but you are the person who makes video about data that people do find genuinely interesting. So, I don't know, maybe there is an idea there. And I think we took it offline then and, took it to the DMs and kind of chatted a little bit about that there. And then, so I was a bit like, okay, well, I'll go away and I'll maybe think something about that. And then kind of over the next few days, I plugged a little bit more data in of, okay, what's some other games to look at and the like. And I think at that point I'd also made a document to just kind of be like, okay, this may become a video idea. I'm not really thinking about it yet, and there'll be a reason for that. But, this was like an interesting insight that I had thought of, which I didn't really put on the data, but it was just like, oh yeah, every single one of these things that have ever won Game of the Year has then gone on to be adapted into like a television show or film or like a Netflix anime or whatever, apart from Astro Bot. And then so I think that started to plant the ideas a little bit of like, okay, is there a bit of like an Oscar bait angle to this? Is there a bit of like an insecurity around games wanting to be more like films or television? And then kind of talking to Bobby Brock a little bit more, he kind of just highlighted a point of, well, if you got all this data, it's just kind of about like asking what are some interesting questions, what are some like cool insights that you can pull away from this. So I was a bit like, all right, well, let's lean a little bit into the aspect of, single player only. That's kind of a main one. Camera perspective as well was like something that was on my mind of, oh yeah, like all of these are third person games. Like, this was part of a larger part of the script before I kind of ended up reworking it, but like third person just kind of as like the meeting points of Super Mario 64 and FPS games of, well, you have the control scheme that everybody loves from Doom, you have the look that everybody loves from Mario, and then that kind of combined together. GTA 3 is like obviously the game that popularizes it, but it existed before then, but like every game becomes that now. And like, when you think of like a prestige game in your head, it's all third person, which is funny because there was also a bit in the script where I was talking about something that crossed over a little bit when I did Bullet Time, the podcast that I did for a little while, which was about like that weird era where FPS games were really big. And because this was the start of like the sort of prestige era, they kind of melded together there of like, you had stuff like BioShock where it's like, wow, this is a really smartly written game and a smart world, but it's also Call of Duty with magic. And you just had like a lot of games where it was like, we really want to make like smart genre elevated pieces, but they have to be FPS games. And then I think with The Last of Us, that's sort of what opened the door to every game kind of becoming like The Last of Us, which I sort of kind of touched on in the video, but my kind of the most fun thing that I pointed out, and I did make a screenshot of it here, but I was on a Discord call with a couple of people, including Harry, where I kind of mentioned some of the insights that I pulled out, and my favorite one was the fact of, and this was an idea that came from a video that I did a few years ago, where like, it was just as I joined the Isabel server, and it was like the first video that I had made in a while, and kind of as a thing to brush the cobwebs of just like, oh, it's my games of the year, like, oh, the blah blah blah. And I decided to go with this weird sort of format of like every single game that I covered would have the same kind of, it'd be a question and answer thing, and all of them would have the same questions to be answered of like, okay, well, and they'd be things like, oh, how do you feel like they reflect the year, blah, blah, blah. But then one question was, what does the A button do? And I'm not quite sure where that idea had come from, but I just really like the idea of like, okay, how do you extrapolate that out into what do, you know, when you think of the GameCube controller, which it had like a giant A button on it and everything being very sort of cramped down to a sort of a number of simple verbs, and maybe you might have modifiers which are on triggers and stuff, but, you know, A is what you're going to be pressing like 90% of the time in most games. And so I was like, okay, well, what does an A button in this game, what does that mean about that? And this is probably like my favorite bit of data finding out of all the Keighley games was, like over half of the Game of the Year winners, if you press A, you jump, which like you say that to people and you go, yeah, okay, that makes sense. It's like a platform or whatever. But like, you know, you describe to somebody, okay, what's The Last of Us 2 about? Oh, it's this Road to Revenge kind of, you know, it's a sequel to a game which was already very dire. It was about like a man who lost his child at the beginning of an apocalypse. So like he's like he reflects this gritty world that he's in that's so kind of mired in misery. And, you know, he's given like the surrogate daughter who then, you know, kind of begins as cargo, but then as it goes along, he kind of opens up again and becomes like a fully realized human being. Okay, what does the X button do? Oh, you jump. Like, oh, okay. I didn't realize jumping was going to be such an important thing here. And yeah, like Death Stranding 2 and like all of these really heady and serious games. It's like, oh yeah, no, it's Mario. You press A and you jump. It's Mario. And it's like, okay, cool. So yeah, and kind of explaining this in the chat did get like a really decent pop. So I was like, okay, yeah, I think that needs to be in the video. And then yeah, 2 more days and I just start to go, okay, right, I'm going to hop into this properly. I'm going to try and flesh this out a little bit. And then I started running it past Harry, who I trust with a lot of my scripts nowadays because I like his feedback, and also ran it past Bobby B, because I was like, oh, hey, if I decide to do this video because you're Mr. Data Man, can you like just give me a little bit of direction? He was like, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, both of them gave me quite nice feedback on that, and then sort of went into redrafting from there. And then there's it's not that big of a gap compared to everything else, but there is a gap between the 13th and the 19th where it's like, okay, I'm going to leave that to bed and then I'll pick it up another time. And that was because I decided to make an entirely different video in that time of Steam Next Fest, which I'm only really highlighting this because of how accelerated the timeline of this video kind of gets towards the end. But yeah, about 2 weeks ago, over a week ago, I decided, okay, well, let's pick this back up again. Let's try and finalize this a little bit. Sort of the script just went from being very flabby and all these kind of different... And to be honest, you do kind of... And again, this sort of gets into the whole thing of like, oh, if you could do this video again. And I think it's, hindsight's 2020, and it's like, well, if I had all the time on the world in this, maybe rather than making one big video, you could pare it down to a couple of different subject matters. Like the A button thing could easily be spun off into its own video of like, okay, I'm looking at every game that's released from, over this year, and like all of them you press A to jump. But it was kind of the sort of the final video is a lot of like very quick hit insight stuff, which also sort of fits with like how I've been doing the Next Fest videos and a lot of the recent stuff. But sort of, the video begins with that kind of through line of, oh, what's an Oscar bait video game? And then I think you get a lot of that with The Last of Us Part 2. But then there's almost like a halfway point where I just go, okay, and let's just look at the other data trends and then try and use that as a thing of, where else does it go? And the end of the video, I kind of realized, oh, maybe I need to bring this back a little bit to that original thesis. I don't know if I did super successfully, but it's, it kind of is what it is. I think this, to anyone who's watching this who isn't Josh or doesn't really know this lesson to heart, I think there's the issue with making a video that sometimes you want to make it perfect, but then making stuff perfect means you're just never going to make a video. And I'm kind of proud of how quickly this managed to turn around considering a lot of false starts. And I would say that one of the benefits of this was trying to work out how to get this out at a certain date, because I didn't quite realize that when I started working on this, it could be ready for Halloween. And kind of all the way along, I was like, well, I'm not going to rush to get there. Kind of my big moving target for this was to try and get it out before the Keighley nominations were actually announced, which usually happens around the first to second week in November, because then there's a month lead time then before the Game Awards actually in December. So I was like, well, this needs to come out before the Keighleys, because I'm talking so much about, like, based on these data trends, this is what's going to come, this is what I think is going to win. But yeah, sorry, that was a bit of a weird tangent there. But yeah, I mostly just kind of wanted to be a thing of, obviously there's places that could have improved here. And I always think with videos like this, it's like, well, if you have the ability to do so, like, video is this kind of cool medium where you can just sort of take it and transform it anyway. So if you wanted to make a better video out of what I had done, then absolutely go ahead and do so. But yeah, I kind of just I hard focused on the things that I thought was interesting. I tried to get that nice little thesis through with the Oscar bait stuff, and then went into audio. Then handed it off to Mitch to get mastered, and he got it back in a day's time, which super quick. If you need your audio done, Heavy Eyed is your guy for that. Haven't been using him recently, and some people did mention on like current videos that, I kind of wish your audio was a little bit better. I think that's maybe just down to the fact that I haven't been using him recently, because it's just, quick turnaround stuff. But I think where there's going to be the opportunity to do so, I will probably go back to him. Now, we're going to get more on the creative side of stuff, which I guess is why you wanted this video in the first place. But yeah, I kind of then, all the way along as I was doing these interesting questions and stuff, I was generating charts then directly. I should probably say, so all of this, and pretty much like every project I've done, like Google Docs, Google Sheets, like, just so... Like, because sometimes, like, with that, like, initial note that I made, like, I did that on my phone, just because I was, like, I couldn't get to, like, you can see 2 a.m, I couldn't sleep, I had this, like, idea in my head, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to get this down on paper, just so I don't forget it. And, like, it's just quite nice to then, like, Sheets not so much, but it's nice to kind of pull that up as a kind of a quick reference thing. But, like, yeah, just nice to keep kind of plugged in on that. But, I used Google Sheets to generate these charts then. And I think I even posted on Blue Sky, like, hey, I'm kind of doing this at the moment. I was, like, blotting out all these bits of information to try and, like, make a tease of, hey, you folks might find this interesting in a week's time or whatever. And... yeah, like, I guess maybe I'm skipping ahead a little bit here. Like, I was also collating a lot of footage because I wasn't quite sure what this video was going to look like. Now, this ended up being pain in the ass number one with this video, was that I downloaded all of the not all of them, but like all of the interesting Game Awards footage, because not that I made a storyboard for this, and maybe that might have made a bit of sense, but... in my head, I was kind of thinking there'd be like instances where if I talk about a game or a particular year of the Keighleys, I could just punch into that footage or punch into when that nomination came up, and then like just I could have that, and then I could have my data alongside it. And so I downloaded all of those. And when I download videos, I use 4K Downloader, which is a great bit of software, but it has a bit of an issue where if you download too many videos at once, or if you download like a lot of like massive videos at once, because these are all like a couple of gig, you're basically, YouTube gets like really, and Google service get like really suspicious, and it's like, what the fuck are you doing? And then they start throttling you, and basically they stop you from like downloading for a few days. That ended up being a really big issue with this, because kind of, as I went along and as I was making the video, I was kind of doing this thing where I was like, ooh, it'd be good to use this footage here, or it'd be good to, or like, I have no ideas what I want to do, or I don't want to make a graph of this. I'm just going to use like footage from the game trailer. I go to 4K Downloader, and nope, you can't download anything, fuck you. So one thing I would say about this project, which as a win and as something that if I wanted to promote it to people, get a Mac, because I'm currently recording this with the Mac screen recording software, I should add, while recording my audio in Audition, because it doesn't let you do mic audio for some odd reason, but whatever. But yeah, it was very nice to literally just go to a video on YouTube, put it in theater mode or maximize or whatever, crop a little window to what I wanted to record, let it run for, because that's the thing with 4K downloader as well, is that you're just downloading the whole video. So if you only need like 15 seconds from, you know, you need like a character jumping around or whatever, and you're downloading like an entire 6-hour playthrough, just, you know, it's incredibly wasteful. So like just being able to like cut the screen and punch in and record, I think it's just lush. And again, like screen grabbing as well was also like super useful in this. I was like going to my Google Sheets and I was just like grabbing, you know, little bits and cuts and stuff like that to sort of have this sort of like paper collaging effect. And yeah, again, it's just like instantaneous, throws it straight on your desktop. Like, I know you can do that in Windows, but it hasn't got like any built-in video recorder stuff like that. And I think it's just like, it's such like a great value add like to this. And like genuinely it made like I don't think this project would have happened if I had done it like in Windows essentially. And I would say that like of a lot of recent video projects that I've done, like those have only really come together as quickly as they have because of because it's just the Mac is like not just like like a really strong like, and this is like an entry Mac Mini as well. Like it's 500 quid, you know, and the thing is just choose through work. Like I have not like hit an issue with anything, like let alone Photoshop and Illustrator. Like Audition and Premiere, it's like just cuts through it absolutely easily. So very much recommended. That being said, so when we then got onto the graph making, I was like, okay, well, I don't want to just put the Google Sheets in as is because they look a little bit old-fashioned. So I did decide to kind of tart them up a little bit. So this was kind of the initial document that I built. And as you can see, there's kind of already a couple. I think this might have been the first graph I experimented with. And I was like, well, let's change out the fonts on the titles to... I think that's Helvetica. Yeah, it's Helvetica New with the nice wide, cool-looking font. This was like a graph that I didn't end up really reusing in the video, but this was much like I mentioned the Polygon guy in the video. This was like actually a reference to an Aftermath article about why we should kind of have more titles for like games because your AAA zone sort of like 1,500, and then your indie zones maybe like more is kind of around this area. But like this is so dense with dots, like they were saying that saying something's indie is like, so you know, Rocket League is an indie game, but obviously it's not because like so many people work on it. Or like Disco Elysium was made by a couple of hundred people versus say The Messenger, which was only made by like 15 people. So like, how do you differentiate between them a little bit? And so like I found like such a fascinating idea, and I think I was going to make more of a point of that in the video, but that didn't really end up being the case. I did talk about credit and install size though, because I was like, yeah, like there is like an interesting trend there of the Game of the Year creators, the teams are getting smaller year on year, whereas install sizes, you know, and install sizes make sense. Like we're on the PS5 now, everything's built for 4K, whereas credit size I think was more interesting because it's, you know, a lot of talk in the industry about, well, the studios are getting shut down left and right and everything's getting like razor thin. And so like you can kind of see it as a double-edged thing of, well, it's cool that smaller teams are making stuff because you can be a bit more risky and a bit more creative. But on the same kind of knife, are they getting smaller because they want to make games cheaper, and are they working these people to death as a result? But again, something I maybe could have gone into in the video, but didn't really too much. This graph I don't think I ended up using as well, which is a shame because that would have actually like outlined. Yeah, you can genuinely see action adventure and action RPG just dominate, and if you consider the action adventure a platformer because X makes you jump, then yeah, like it all just kind of combines together. Score was like one of the, I think age rating I did before score, but like I just had the idea of, oh well, I'm using the PEGI icons anyways, like well, I mentioned Peggy, why don't I use the icons instead? And then for this, like, where you have Metacritic on one side and like showing the difference between a Moss player's 90 and above and whatever, and then you have the OpenCritic stuff as well. Like this, I think ended up like turning out super pretty. Again, kind of wish I had made more of a point about the fact that like, hey, look, you know what actually won in 2021 and what maybe should have won critically. Two very different things. But again, like you look at the trend lines and they are getting closer and closer as the year goes on. Age rating as well, I thought was really interesting. I haven't read the comments of the video yet, but I'd be interested to see if people are kind of complaining about, well, you know, only mature games, you know, like that's why it's a real art form. And it's like, yeah, I guess, but, you know, there's like a lot of famous films that like anyone can, you know, a lot of like groundbreaking films that anybody can watch. There's a lot of like incredible, you know, like Songs of the Key of Life. Anybody can listen to that. Abbey Road. Anybody can kind of listen to it. You know, as a child, you may not appreciate the sort of technique behind it or even some of the content of the lyrics. But again, there's an accessibility there that I think games especially have this like really big issue of, because, and I tried to get into this a little bit with the video, part it down just to make it a little bit more interesting, but maybe it's a nugget that could be explored a little bit more, but just that weird prestige era of, we need to make these more mature, but they did it in like sort of the most immature way possible of, you know, Shadow the Hedgehog or the Jak and Daxter 2, where the first words he ever, you know, he goes from a cartoon silent protagonist to saying, I don't give a damn. And it's like, oh God, you know? Yeah, like, but then I did think it was really interesting that just the trend is year on year. And again, like, I know there's the Twitter joke of, wow, if my baby keeps gaining size, by the end of the year, it'll be 55 tons. Yeah, like, that'll plateau, you know, that's not super indicative of anything. But again, I thought it was interesting that just as the years have gone on, it has shown this move away from like God of War, Sekiro, The Last of Us to, you know, Baldur's Gate and It Takes Two and Astrobot. Like games are getting a little bit more, and maybe that does kind of trend along with just language options going up and up every year as well, which is super cool. But yeah, I think the graphs in this turned out super cute. Like the A button one again is like my favorite facts, and I think it's also my favorite graphic. It's Mario Jumpin'. I wanted it to be the one from Donkey Kong, but I couldn't find it, so I went with Super Mario Bros. It's the pointy finger from Final Fantasy. I think that's the dash upgrade from Mega Man X, because turns out not a lot of older games had evades and dashes. And it's just a classic question mark block because, you know, it's a question mark. Don't worry about it. Engine count as well, I think, also turned out cool. I think, again, that's like a thing that could have been expanded out a bit more of like... And it's silly to say because, like, you know, film doesn't have, like, best camera maker. You know, Red One wins for all these films it worked on, but... I do think that like engine is such like a weirdly bigger part of games than we kind of give them credit for, and the fact that Unreal and Unity do dominate. You know, I mean that was the cool thing that I didn't realize was that, as my expectation was, it was just going to be all Unreal games, but now like because of the indies and especially Games for Change, Unreal sort of beats it out. And even like XNA having as many games as it does year on year, I think is really cool. And again, like you could follow that thread and go, why is that the case? And you can see that like, oh well, Maddie Thorson began development like kind of you know, in that sort of era where a lot of Flash developers were hopping onto XNA because it was Microsoft's sort of toolkit for making Xbox Live games and like Xbox Live indie games especially. Again, yeah, I don't know. I'm gassing a bit too much. I'll talk about this though, which is like, so I think Astrobot was the first one I made, and this was a thing of like, okay, how can I? They're almost essentially like baseball playing cards of like, okay, how can I take the info that's in the sheet and make it look a little bit more visually appealing? Main like visual and like this very much looks like kind of what I was imagining in my head versus like the couple of flourishes that I added from then on. But like I always knew that SteamDB is really good for getting really high quality images of like game covers, especially games that aren't on Steam, funnily enough. But yeah, like nice big, box art. I didn't have to double up the title as well because they were always in the artwork. And then do your grid for your Metacritic and your OpenCritic and your combined score. Publisher, developer, country of origin with a little emoji, release date. These were a little bit more spread apart until I realized that I hadn't added PEGI rating, and at that point I basically just crushed all of these up and then kept these ones, which sort of the hierarchy I was thinking was like these are all like super definable, like these are hard data, whereas this is kind of this is where I've come in and kind of come up with, okay, well, that could be arguable, this is all arguable, blah, 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 that's arguable from an aspect, blah, blah, blah. And then what I've kind of called the Wordle grid for your winners, your narratives and whatever, where, like, that the color scheme literally just came from when I was doing the Google Sheet, where I kind of thought of a thing of like, green means go, red means no, and then yellow was like for any kind of weird edge cases. I think my favorite one was like Elden Ring, single player only. Well, it's yellow because it's like, well, yeah, technically it is, but you can ask for people to help you out and hop in, so that doesn't mean it's multiplayer anymore. Well, versus, It Takes Two, where you have to play that in multiplayer. There's no other option for it. Like, The Last of Us Part 2 didn't have multiplayer, so I don't think that's an issue. Sekiro definitely didn't have it. Like, I think, because, I had, like, written out for Donkey Kong Bonanza, like, I think that's in yellow, because technically you can do the co-op mode in that, of, like, the old Mario games, but yeah, no, I just thought it would be a nice thing to make these kind of graphics to go along with it. Like, I kind of realized that this was going to be more of an image-driven thing, so making, like, the prettiest images possible would be really good. And I think this was also the point where I realized okay, how much room have I really got to experiment with this video? Because I think if you had asked some, like, and especially, like I said, like, I was talking to Bobby B about it quite early on, I think a lot of people would go, well, obviously you have to make it in Unity or you have to make it in Google Earth, like those videos, because how else could you do it? Which I think is like, if you have that skill set, absolutely. Whereas, like, despite learning Maya in university, I don't own any 3D software, and as much as I've tried, I've never really learned Blender. So I kind of threw my hands up there and I said, that's not really going to happen, I don't think. So if I'm going to do this sort of graph-based approach, I need to be a little bit clever about it. And in fairness, I didn't really watch a lot of Bobby Brock's videos to kind of get an idea of how this stuff is presented there. I mostly remember it out in my head, but I did watch a lot of John Boy's chart party stuff, because that was kind of pointed out as a thing of, well, because like the joke I said of, well, if I make this a video, how is it going to look? And the instant response was like, well, look at chart party. And I didn't quite realize how static a lot of that is. Like, it is mostly his narration that's doing the heavy lifting. Before I move on, like, one thing that I didn't really end up in the video, but I did end up like prototyping initially and then just sort of gave up on when it ended up becoming like such a big deal, like project, was I did actually break everything out into separate layers. And my whole kind of idea with that was like, oh, well, and the whole idea was going to be like, as I talk in the script, like, the score is like this, but then, and like compare that to the average, which is like, and like maybe in Premiere you'd have it where all the dots cut, like you have the dots all popping in, and then the line would like draw in, which would have just been like an easy wipe to do with that. But basically, as I wrote the script, and kind of what I ended up doing was like I had the script on one side of the screen, and these graphs, like these artboards on the other, and I was basically like, okay. So I guess I did kind of storyboard it out. Like, basically, I'd look for a line where it'd be like, The Last of Us parts, but as you can see, install sizes actually go up, and there's an average of 75. And so it's like, okay, I need I need like a chart for install size, or I need a chart for language options go up. But I need a chart for that, or like I think the ones that I like ended up having to create after the fact with like anything that's on this side. So yeah, like the engine ones I had to do after the fact. The A-button ones I ended up having to do after the fact. There's another Illustrator file as well, because weirdly, as I was working on this, and I think it was just because I was doing so much copy and pasting and stuff, it started like chugging quite badly, like to the extent of like I was trying to type stuff in and it just really wasn't happening. So I ended up having to break quite a lot of this out into separate files to make it a bit more manageable. But yeah, I think it was because of that, and like just because of the fact that like revealing information bit by bit didn't really come up in the script that much, apart from a couple of funny instances. I didn't really end up following this along. And then it was also a thing of like, well, you just go to export artboards and it just kind of spits them all out as JPEGs. And like, and again, funnily enough, they were initially going to be PNGs, and the idea was going to be like, you know, oh, I could put this on a different color background or whatever, because, you know, a lot of people say, oh, I don't like really bright colors, you know, kind of tone it down. But as I kind of ended up developing the video and using that really nice gray grid paper, it didn't end up being like such a problem in the end. Like, it was sort of nicely toned down. So yeah, that didn't really end up being. So I kind of just stuck with white because it just looked cleaner. And like, again, like when I didn't read all of the artboards as well, so everything was kind of made in mind on being on a light background anyways. So yeah, like again, maybe if I had redone this again, maybe I would have done like a dark mode version or whatever, which maybe wouldn't have taken super long to do. But yeah, I guess it's really for whoever would have wanted it. But yeah, that's sort of where we got with the graphs. And yeah, again, like with the, I am like genuinely quite happy with how this has turned, like these graphics turned out, like almost to the extent of, I kind of imagine that I could have almost done a version of this video where it was made like in Canva or like in PowerPoint or something, and it was literally just a slideshow. But basically, as I got into video development, I realized it wasn't going to be that easy, which, speaking of which, yeah, so about a few days ago, because yeah, no, this became a, this is what I meant in regards to not being too precious about the idea. And yeah, the video could have been better, but it couldn't have been perfect, because then it would never have been made. And it certainly wouldn't have been made going from the 28th of October to today, Halloween. So yeah, I basically then, when I had enough graphs, I was like, okay, it's either shit or get off the pot time. So I made my start on video data, and yeah, that was kind of when I started making these extra graphs as well, because I realized, oh, actually there's quite a bit missing here, which then takes us to our first failed prototype. And I call it a failure, but it was more of a thing of, I think I can do it this way. This isn't the initial plan that I had for the video, but I was like, oh, well, if I wanted to make a Bobby Broke video, like, well, I don't know Blender, and I don't know, you know, I don't have Maya anymore, but I do have Adobe After Effects, and that has really decent 3D stuff in it. And I say decent, but then the moment I started, like, playing around with this, I was like, oh, this is going to be a giant pain in the ass, because, yeah, I kind of even realized at this point that because nothing was really storyboarded or really kind of figured out, like, and again, like I've done this in Maya, so I know it's like way easier there, but just sticking a bunch of playing cards in and then just kind of like laying them out in a really nice sort of almost like detective's corkboard grid. Really easy to do there. Not so easy to do in After Effects, unfortunately. And like, if I wanted to do, like, they don't really let you, the sort of like infinite canvas thing, they only really let you do that in 3D. The moment you do it in 2D, like, it just disappears off the canvas. It's you know, you have to comp stuff, and pre-comps like hide it, and even doing like a ton of pre-comps like slows your computer down like super badly. So I was a bit like, you know, because yeah, like I think if I had done it this way, people wouldn't, like, you'd have the whole thing where it's like, let's talk about Astrobot, and you know, and it zooms in, do, and then like, then I would have done like the yellow highlighter stuff and whatever, and then maybe scoot over to something else. But I think for how much of a pain it would have been trying to get this working in After Effects, for that little of a payoff, it didn't really seem like a smart idea. This was only about like 20 minutes of monkeying around though, so it wasn't like a super amount of time lost, fortunately. Versus And it's a shame that I didn't keep this because it was quite a nice bit of animation. But I then decided, okay, let's just move over to Premiere. And it was almost a bit of the final kind of version ended up being like a weird mix of the two concepts, because as you can kind of see in this giant picture here, some of the scrolling stuff I just made in Photoshop. I was like, okay, well, I know that a window size is, the video's been made in, 1080p. It's going to be, 1920 by 1080. So I know that's as big as a window is going to be, which means that if I make this canvas 4 times the length and then hide stuff on the other side, it means I can do cool stuff. Bobby Broccoli is always going to have me beat in regards to all the cool 3D stuff, but it's like, okay, well, Guerrilla, let's do some Guerrilla Combat. What stuff that I can lean on? Well, I'm pretty okay at Photoshop, so I can make these graphics a bit prettier and a bit more handmade as a result. And that was kind of the big thing, as an aesthetic choice that I started leaning into, was because the Illustrator files are very digital and very clean looking, which is I don't get to do Illustrator very often, but that's the stuff I really like, is super sharp, super clean looking vector stuff. And then when it comes to anything that I do in Photoshop, that's where I call it, not that I talk much about thumbnail stuff, but I think that's kind of my weird calling card with a lot of people's thumbnails is what I call patina, where, it's like patina on a frying pan, but seasoning, I think, is probably a better word for it, but it's adding these little kind of, and I think patina is maybe a better word, because it's you don't really want it on a pan because it's dirt essentially, but it's, it's real. These kind of this sort of where the ink's coming off. Well, it's like you've tried to print off a black picture off your computer, and you're missing very obvious bits here, and then having the tape and tiny bits of drop shadow and stuff like that, and even the fact that I think the text is slightly it's almost you got a big rubber stamp and done it that way, which that's all stuff that I find super. That's the visual stuff I really like, and so I really wanted to put a lot of that in the video, which funnily enough kind of more came in the final stages of the video, which I guess I'll get into when we get there. But in regards to some of the graphical elements of the video, which maybe I'll go into a bit more, I'll open up Premiere and actually show there, but a lot of the time, when I came up with a graphic idea, I would take a snapshot in Premiere, bring it into Photoshop, and then just start putting graphical elements on top. So with this, where I think it was talking about it goes both ways, anything that wins a game of the year then usually gets adapted into something else. I just had this visual idea of you'd get that, and then you'd see the images sort of pop in like that of all the different announcements or adaptations that it got, which I thought was kind of a cool idea. It is a shame that I am missing that prototype vision, because the intro was a bit more because I was if I'm not doing the 3D thing, let's lean a bit more on motion graphic stuff. And there was a lot of whiz bang, yellow highlighting and penning around and stuff like that. But that ended up being such a pain in the ass to do. And again, the final result of it all didn't look super great. So I just ended up going, now let's go to bed. Let's start fresh in the morning and maybe figure out from there, which is why I made the jokey tweet of, it turns out making a video, which is a bunch of JPEGs, is actually harder than making a video that's a bunch of MP3s, which so true me from 2 days ago. But so then I ended up just restarting the project from scratch, which I might as well pull up my Prem timeline and kind of show some of the weird things from here. So in regards to audio, my initial thought was that I was going to use all music that was used from John Boy's videos. I ended up only using this one in the first, which that ended up being a really stupid idea, because I got a fucking email earlier that said, your video is no longer monetized because you used this song. It's God damn it. Well, that's my own dang fault. They haven't dinged my channel though, so I guess that's good. But if the video does super well, I'm not making a penny on it, which fucking blows, but hey ho. But then the other bits of music I wasn't like super sold on. So what I ended up using, because it was like this funny jazzy track, I ended up just using like music from Gran Turismo's lounges. I think that came from having a chat with somebody in the week of, man, the music in Gran Turismo is so fun and jazzy. And I was like, that's good craft music, so maybe I'll do that. But yeah, like, again, I showed you the picture of just, it's a really long JPEG. And yeah, that's what it was. It was just me tracking a really long JPEG across the timeline. And then, yeah, popping some elements in. And yeah, this is initially where I go, okay, I don't know what these parts should look like, so let's just use some video. Then use some trailers with bits of that and that. Again, I had no idea what this bit should look like, so it was just more footage from a film. This initially, this funnily enough survived from the weird prototype version, but I could no longer get those red bits animated, so they no longer move, which is a shame. But then we do have these elements coming on top. This nice bit of motion blurring, by the way. So this is something they've recently added to Premiere, which they are, what's the name of the... Yeah, Film Impact. Never heard of them, but like they put out an announcement being like, yeah, we've added a bunch of Film Impact stuff to Premiere, which I used on, I did 3 little short videos a couple of weeks ago where I used a lot of these and I was like, yeah, this is lush. Like, just that little bit of motion blur and that little bit of like, it just has a little bit more juice to it than the inbuilt stuff. So anywhere I could, I ended up using it. And yeah, and then on some more footage. This I had always had in my mind of like being animated where it would be a blue chunk first and then the red, but I think I just ended up kind of powering it back so it wasn't too hard on the eyes. And then this was all the magic of, well, literally I don't have to do a thing. I already have this big ass chart, so I'm just going to pan and scan it along and, bop, like... Netflix style documentaries. We went through all the documents. And that's the thing as well. I'm not really using a lot of like sort of click and attention noises in videos anymore. I'm mostly just seeing if people like gel with what we have. But yeah, and then we get the start of the yellow pen, which of course is just, unfortunately, Illuminati is taking me to court because it's just a shape with a little, just a shape with a wipe on it. And that's all it is. Because of that, you can just duplicate it and anywhere use it else in your program. You just make it bigger or smaller as your heart's content, really. This red pen thing is really funny. I basically just recorded myself in, on my tablet, I just recorded myself in Photoshop, just making a bunch of circles or squares or like underlines and stuff and just... reuse them across the video from there. And then, we have a couple more wipes and stuff like that. I think the big thing that, and it's funny because as the video goes along, it does get a little bit more complex, but also a lot of the effects get a little bit more simplified. And that's basically because, like, earlier on, I was literally, like, panning and scanning all of this stuff by hand because I couldn't figure out how else to do it. But then I very quickly realized that, I could just use because I could just use an adjustment layer with a transform and do it that way of scaling in and out. And it just made it so much easier of everything underneath would get affected and I wouldn't really have to worry about that. But this was really, because this was just a super simple effect. It was literally just, I put my main thing down, scan it along, make it like double length, make a cut, select it, right click it, go to replace with clip from source monitor, and then that was it, and everything was in place. And then I would just go through and just manually like add a little bit of rotation or a little bit of movement to it to almost make it look a bit like stop motion, which was nice. Blocked a little bit out as well because I didn't initially want... I wanted a few things to be surprises, like the A and X button or whatever, so that was all cool with that. All very simple from there. Again, this was just a thing that I realized that, I could literally just screenshot my other images or take stuff from the giant Google sheet that I had and do it that way. But yeah, it was also mostly just like with all these bits of motion and stuff like that, and like the little drop shadows. Again, it was kind of like, well, obviously I don't have a 3D engine here to do this stuff, but if I can kind of figure it out, I can try and keep a running tally of, well, how far away should this bit of paper be from, the paper beneath it and stuff like that, and just try and keep it all kind of consistent from that point. But yeah, all very simple from there. There's nothing like super complex, I don't think. Yeah, no, again, it's mostly just reusing like a kind of a couple of grab bags of effect. It's the yellow highlighter, it's the panning and scanning, it's using punches of actual video here and there to kind of keep engagement up and stuff like that. So yeah, all just super straight, and then this just the sheer amount of data right at the end. And so that was that, and that took about, how long did that take? That took like 2 days to do. I got like half of it done the first day and then the rest of it done the day afterwards. And again, it wasn't being like too precious about any of the effects and stuff. It was just like, okay, here's my bag of tricks. Here's like stuff that I can reuse. And there's so many shots that I just reuse throughout the thing. And again, like even towards the end, it's a nice thing because it's like, oh my God, it's almost like it's a visual callback to, previous parts of it. Yeah, like, oh, it's a little visual callback to the beginning. And I'm literally just reusing what I had made there. So yeah, it's just about being clever with all that stuff. But yeah, basically, I think I had it done before tea time then in the end. So I thought, okay, well, I'll render it out because now I'm going to, this is like 90% of the, it's like a thumbnail. It's like, this is good, but I think there's a little bit more seasoning that I can add to get it just over the line. But I realized that if I was to put seasoning on the main comp, it wouldn't render very quickly. So I published it out. I brought it back in then as its own separate thing, and then added a bunch of effects on it, which were a little bit of noise, which you probably does not show up at all on the YouTube version, but I thought it just added a nice bit of grain and also made it look more like I was filming through a camera, like it was like actual noise on the gate, which is cool. Wonderglow, just to kind of have this almost effect of like pointing a bright light at a white object and getting that sort of bounce lighting off of it, which I just think makes it look just so much nicer as a result. Vignette, you got to have a vignette. Folks love it, and again, this is another Film Impacts one, and it's so lush because like not only have they got the the dark edges stuff built in, softness is also built in, chromatic aberrations built in. It's just like super nicely figured out. I think I did have to, I ended up having to move it a little bit just so it wouldn't distort the corner titles too much, but that was literally about it. And then the final thing, and this was like a late in the day sort of like realization, was, they have a camera shape plugin, because this I nearly brought into After Effects to basically add like a little wiggler command to like just a tiny bit of offset, like to make it look like it was done like hand cam style. But no, Film Impacts just had it built in. So I was like, sick as hell. Like, I'm just going to use this in the video. And it just gives it like so much of like a more of a, like, I think that's the thing that makes this video, like, I think this video is good, but I think like the thing that pushes it into like really good territory is like, it's that very kind of handmade touch of all of it. And again, like, I'm never going to be able to compete with like somebody like a Bobby Broccoli or people who do like 3D on a day-to-day basis. But like, if I am going to lean into my strengths, which is kind of like those thumbnails which do have like patina and like realistic lighting or whatever in it, try and bring that a little bit to the video. And again, I think it even plays really nicely with these images that I made, because it looks like, like I printed them all out and, animated with them, which is like super sick. So yeah, that's the story behind this video, really. There's no real, the thumbnail, as it was rendering out, I just made the thumbnail because I was like, I'm not super sure what to do. I'll just overlay it. But I think I looked at the Chart Party ones where he just like lays out the different graphs, and I was like, I'll just have them as background color and then have the date and the thing and go from there. And then Uploaded it yesterday night, and then it went live today. And yeah, that's the video that you watched. So yeah, went from a video that began with somebody saying at the beginning of the month, I think that would be cool. Making another video, picking it up then a week ago and going, all right, let's get this over the line, and basically making it happen in the last few days. So yeah, it turns out if you want to make like a chart party sort of thing, if you have the time, you very much can do it pretty quickly. So yeah, I hope this video has been informative. Thank you. Subscribe to Hot Cider.